What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another podcast. Man, that feels so interesting to do again. I want to use this as an opportunity to reintroduce the podcast, talk about where we have gone, what has been going on in life, why I stopped, like all these different factors. But I kind of want to give you guys an origin story before I start, because I realized that I never have done that with this show, podcast, YouTube video channel, whatever you want to call it. And kind of explain to you. And something that I've realized, and I'll get into this eventually, I started a mentorship program in January of this year. And something that I realized is that you need people to trust you by letting them know who you are and letting them get to know you. And the beginning of this channel, admittedly, I was just giving out mindset advice and talking my shit as if people already knew who I was, where I've been, what I've done, all these different things, and just assuming that they'll find out along the way. So I'm going to give you a little bit of an origin story, and then I'm going to tell you in this podcast where I have been, why I cut the podcast, all these different things, for a little bit at least, and we're back now. May 11th, 1993 is when your boy was born. That's when I was born. San Diego, California. When I was 3 years, I was born to a Mexican father and a white woman, right? My mom. By the time I was 3, we moved back to Wisconsin. I talk a lot about mindset and not playing the victim card for a couple of reasons. The main reason here is because I come from a disenfranchised background. And I come from a very poor background. I come from chronic illness. I come from suffering from anxiety and depression. I come from so many different things that kind of have culminated this mindset that I have cultivated throughout time, because I was in a spot in life many a time where I had to. I was forced into callousing and becoming the person that I am today. And a lot of you guys don't really know who I am today. Fair enough. But I'm going to give you a taste of that now. Okay. So growing up, my parents were divorced by the time I was like 11 years old. We had always lived in a townhome. I've never gotten into an actual house until I was older. And the first time that I lived into a house was when I was like 22 years old and we were renting. The first house that I've ever had the privilege of buying was recently. And so growing up, I lived in, I don't know if it's called a townhome. That sounds a little bit too fancy for where I was. But I lived in a duplex. That's what it is, a duplex. By the time I was 11 years old, my family, my two parents had separated from each other. I remember the early days, my parents would be sleeping separately. My dad would be sleeping in one room. My mom would be sleeping in the other. I grew up with a lot of, let's say, drama in the house. Never any sort of like physical altercations. My parents just were very loud, yelling, things of that nature. Both of my parents had to work. And so they weren't around very much. And I became a latchkey kid by default. I stayed at my grandma's house a lot in the city. And as a side effect of that, I grew up doing city kid things. And I would come to school out in the suburbs because that's where my parents lived, was in the suburbs. My parents worked pretty hard to give me the life that they did. But it never could seem to be enough, right? At least in terms of like finances and things of that nature. I was very grateful. Still very grateful. But what one of my parents did was they would spend tons of money to be able to give us a life that we couldn't afford and that we just should never have had, right? We couldn't afford that life in the first place, but they wanted to give it to us so bad. As a side effect of that, I grew up very, again, poor. My mom recently had actually just told me that she never told me about the times where she'd be digging in the couch for money to take me to McDonald's. Um, and so, but by the time I turned like 12 or 13, I really understood this. I really understood like kind of where we were in life and like what was going on, because I would see other kids and how they would go on vacations and how they would be able to basically get whatever they wanted. And so naturally at like 13 years old, I started wanting to get money. And because I wanted to get money, I did things that you maybe shouldn't do to get money, right? And so I also did work jobs. I also worked jobs. And my first job ever was when I was like 8 years old, working under the table at a restaurant, doing dishes or busboying, stuff like that. And then later on in life, I would work at like the state fair over summer, and that would give me about $1,500, and I'd spread that out throughout the year, that type of thing. But by the time I got to high school, I was ready to do some illegal shit. And so hence where kind of my childhood criminal background comes from. I'm not going to get too deep into that because it's not really worth talking about, I don't believe, but I was a troublemaker as a child. I was in and out of courtrooms probably once or twice a month for, I don't know, from 13 to like 15, 16, something like that. Around 16 years old is where I found the gym. And that's what really kind of like brought me out of that, is I found the gym, and after school, my focus would be the weight room. And then, I didn't know shit about it back then, but I just knew that that was a place that I wanted to be. There was other like-minded people. There was other men in there. There was men that, eventually became my mentors, things of that nature. And this is a story that I'm going to tell on another podcast. But I remember this is one pivotal moment in my life that really shifted things. And that was a teacher had come up to me junior year of high school and complimented how jacked I was, right? And he looked at me and he said, I'm glad to see that you gave up the drugs. Something of that nature. And I remember thinking to myself, I never did drugs. I wasn't doing drugs. I wasn't even drinking. I was a kid that was causing a lot of trouble, but I wasn't doing that. I was stealing. I was, doing stuff like that. But I never did drugs. Not yet. So, and the only drug that I ever ended up doing was marijuana, was weed. And, but I was a skateboarder. I was in bands, right? And stuff like that. So it was the representation of what maybe that was at the time that gave him that idea. And I was running around with the drug dealers and the drug heads and stuff like that. Around like 16 is when I started to kind of develop this like anxious personality and depressive personality. And at the time, there was really no help for that or like anything like that. So I had to deal with it on my own. And the best way that I dealt with it, unfortunately, was trying to fight a lot of people. And I would try to fight because I was super angry. At this time, also, my parents were arguing all the time, and my dad wasn't really around. My mom was, but my mom wasn't really around either because she was working 2 or 3 jobs. And the other way that I would deal with it was just escaping with music or skateboarding and causing trouble, right? Eventually, I got to a point where I realized that that wasn't going to help me. That wasn't going to save me in what I was, how I was feeling. And so I laid into the gym even more. And then the gym was helping me out a lot. And then I started to do more research at about like 19 years old on orthomolecular medicine, naturopathic stuff, and started deep diving more into health and health interventions. And then I wanted to go to college. But around that time, at like 19 years old, my dad during high school up to that time would be gone a lot. I'm talking months at a time. He would travel back to Mexico. I come from a family of immigrants. And so my dad would be back in Mexico for like 7 months to a year. And so I didn't really see him much during integral points of my life, high school, right? And so what this did as a side effect was my mom and I were extremely broke. we were so broke that, man, I'm going to get like a little bit emotional here. We were so broke that I would come home to the electricity being off at my house. And as like a 16-year-old, 17-year-old boy, I didn't know what to do. And we would, I would have to, I remember thinking, like clearly thinking, like, I don't know where I'm going to get my food from today. And that was terrible. That was terrible. And my girlfriend at the time, like, I don't know if she really knew the struggle that I was going through, but I'd go to her house and her parents would feed me and she would give me like food at lunch and stuff like that. And it was a really hard time, really hard few years, especially for a high school kid. So anyway, I learned very early on that no one was going to save me. No one. And that I needed to figure something out. Unfortunately, the way that I decided to figure it out was a little bit different than other people's. I would say it's a little entrepreneurial in spirit, but we would steal and we would sell, right? We would do some other things, not sell like hard drugs or anything like that, but we would do some other things for money. And then the dream of becoming a musician got even bigger and even more real. This is kind of where like my entrepreneurial journey and my don't give up journey really started and cultivated, right? Was because I had gone through so much hardship in life already as a teenager. The one thing that I felt I could control were the things that I could create. How can I give value? How can I work in this world and develop something that I'm proud of that will hopefully give me a return? And with that was music and actually content creation just in general. And so I had a band and we were called Just For Tonight. It was a better way to say a one night stand. We would go on to play big shows. I have a lot of experience with performing. We would go on to play big shows with bands like Hey Monday, Rookie of the Year, and some others. And we played at places like the Eagles Ballroom, the Rave. We played at I don't remember what it's called, but a big venue in Madison. We played in Illinois, but we played in front of hundreds of people. We played a big show at a park outdoors somewhere, a bunch of basement shows. We did the hustle. And that's when we first learned about merch and how to sell merch and literally just like slanging merch, right? That's where I first learned how to do that type of stuff. Learned how to create a brand, how to create branding around something. That's where that all first started. And then so we go on, eventually the band breaks up. We had plans to go to California. I was going to drop out of high school. We had plans to move to California and go record with All Time Lows recording. What's it called? With their producer. And it just never happened because we broke up and two people wanted to go to college. There was partying involved, stuff like that. So anyway, band breaks up. Awesome. I go to college. I know that college isn't something that I want to do. And so I drop out. I end up dropping out like 3 different times from school. However, again, my parents don't have any money, right? So I can't ask them to help me with anything. And then YouTube becomes a thing. So YouTube had just started. This is when people just figured out that you could like really, really make a killing on YouTube. And I was like, I've always made videos throughout my life. We did jackass videos, skateboarding videos, whatever. My dad, long story short, had a lawsuit because he got like a workers' comp thing at work. He fell off a ladder, broke his spine, that type of thing. I never finished that story, but him and I basically had a big falling out because I found out that I had a whole nother family in Mexico, a sister and stepmom, all these different things. We ended up mending that relationship very recently. But we've, been on and off throughout the years. Anyway, My dad has always actually been my biggest supporter when it came to my dreams. So my dad offered to buy me my first camera, and I started making YouTube videos. I started creating. During that time, I was really into fitness. I started fitness coaching. Also, I was detailing cars. My buddy Kirk, who owns a gym, had told me one day, "You hate that job." I was making a shitload of money. I was like 21 years old, making $75,000 a year. And at that time, that was a lot of money. It's still a good amount of money. And so he had told me, "You hate that job. You're very good at this. Why don't you just quit?" And therein started my actual entrepreneurial journey. I quit my job. I made about $1,000 a month for close to 7 months. And eventually my business popped off. I became a popular trainer in the area. Lots of high school teams would work with me, or not lots, quite a bit of high school teams would work with me. And business really flourished by the time I was 24. By the time I was 24 years old, I had gotten diagnosed with a chronic illness called POTS syndrome. POTS syndrome really took me out, and it scared the shit out of me because I had a son, and I had a son on the way. I can't remember the timeline exactly. Either he was born or he was on the way. And it took me out. I could not work out for probably 6 months. I thought that I was losing everything because I had built this business that was, on its way to a 6-figure income when I was like 24 years old. It was on its way. And I'm not going to do a whole episode on POTS syndrome. I'm just going to tell you kind of like where the mindset comes from, right? I'm not going to do a whole episode on it. But basically they didn't know much about this thing at this point. This was now almost 9 years ago that this happened to me. They didn't know much about it. The only research was on people or female soccer players. That was the only research that was done at that point in time on POTS syndrome, from what I can remember. And eventually it got so bad where I was skipping out on clients. I had literally would like run away and make excuses because of what I was going through. I felt like dizzy, like I was going to pass out, all these different things. Eventually I got sick of the victimhood mindset. I realized that I had a family that I needed to support. And so I took matters into my own hands because I realized that the doctors were not going to help me. My parents couldn't help me. My girlfriend couldn't help me. No one was coming to save me. Again, I was faced with, no one is coming to save you. So I took matters into my own hands. I did as much research as I could on what POTS could possibly be, the interventions that seemed to help it, and I made my own protocol around it. And lo and behold, after about 3-4 months of really sticking to my guns, cleaning up my diet, my gut, taking certain nutrients because of the orthomolecular background that I had and the blood work things that I knew about, I healed my POTS syndrome. And so all of this there's so much more to this story specifically that I could say. But that's basically my origin story, right? And where I get my mindset. And I'll do separate videos and topics and podcasts about that. But I wanted to give you guys kind of an idea of where I come from and all the struggles that I've actually been through in life, right? Later on in life, my baby mom, my ex, we're on good terms, but her and I would eventually break up. And, there would be financial struggles there, things that would pop up. And then eventually what happens now I'm the type of person that takes risks, right? I think that in life you need to try. And so many people don't try. And I guess it's because I have failed so many times in life that I'm okay with trying and failing. And I realize that it doesn't say much about me and my character as much as it does about me and what I'm willing to do, right? And so with all the failures, I've had a lot of wins as well. And I could never take any of those decisions back, like zero regrets. I recently, in the past 3 years, had opened a gym and then closed it due to some business partner stuff. And I'm sure I made mistakes too, right? But all that to say, your boy's been through some shit. And so that's why I decide to give out the advice that I do and tell people the things that I do about mindset and working hard and all these different things, because I truly believe that if I can do it, so can anybody else. Like, I have been through the deepest, darkest depths of anxiety, depression, mental health stuff. And then on top of that, grew up in a single parent home basically. And my dad left and had the whole thing that people, have nightmares about, their one parent having a whole nother family, and being a criminal as a kid, and, street stuff, we'll keep it there. Street stuff later on, right? And chronic illness and so many things, trying and failing. I feel like I have been through 100 people's lives in my lifetime. And that's where I get this feeling of, I know that I can help somebody by telling stories about what I've been through. I know this has been jumbled, but I just, this is something that I've been meaning to talk about. And to be honest with you, it feels good to talk about it. So, growing up, I went through a lot of financial distress, family distress, fighting, crime, street stuff, like I said, a little bit here and there, chronic illness, mental health, all that shit, dude. So yeah, my life has been a crazy ride, dude. And I love it. All right. Now to lighten up the mood, I think it's been probably like 20 some minutes here, right? It's been like, let's see. 22 minutes. So, okay, if you guys have any questions on any of that stuff or want me to dive deeper, do a podcast and things that I've found, whatever, on that stuff, go ahead and leave that in the comments. Now let's talk about where I have been and why I stopped the podcast. I hope you guys got something from that. I hope that clarifies some things, clears some stuff up. Now, where have I been? All right, so I mentioned earlier that I had joined a mentorship program in January. So I had closed my gym, I think 2 years ago-ish now. No, it'll be a year and a half. About a year and a half ago. I decided I wanted to do the podcast more full-time and try to make it happen. Podcasts are a long journey, okay? This YouTube stuff, long journey. And I found that out pretty quick. You can't mindset your way into becoming a podcaster or a YouTuber or anything like that. What you can mindset yourself into is being a hard worker and being able to grind. And so I realized, hey, this podcast thing isn't going as fast as I would like it to. I need to definitely supplement my income right now. We had a bunch of bills coming up. We were buying a house, all these different things. So I joined a mentorship program. I'm going to tell you guys a crazy story about that later on. Joined a mentorship program and completely revamp and rebuild my business. It worked out swimmingly. Absolutely, like better than I could have ever imagined. They gave me systems, taught me things that I didn't know, even throughout all the successes of my business, because my business, besides the gym venture, has been very successful since basically the beginning of me starting it. I've coached hundreds of so many different types of athletes and Gen Pop, and I've worked with every every population that you can think of: chronic illness, professional athletes, D1 athletes, high school to go to D1, all this stuff, right? Great. I've been so blessed with the people that I've gotten to work with, which is kind of funny when you hear some people in the CrossFit space talk about they've coached more. It is what it is. Okay. I digress. Anyways. So where have I been? Where have we been? Where's the podcast been? Look, this podcast world in the CrossFit space, I'm going to keep it a full buck with you guys about the CrossFit space. I love every opportunity that I have been given. And my buddy Roderick, like a good friend of mine, and I am so grateful for him and everything that he's done for us. Like everything that he's done. He's the meme for time, Roderick Lopez. He is probably one of the best friends that I have been able to have the pleasure of having in my life the past couple of years. He's one of the greatest guys, bar none. But what I found was coming into the CrossFit world is how much drama, and it has nothing to do with him, by the way. There's so much drama in the CrossFit space. And to me, it's like kind of mind blowing because it's seemingly about nothing, right? And I fancy myself a problem solver and I grew up with let's put it like this. I grew up in a household where emotions were high. I grew up with a dad that I grew up with men around me that were very emotional and not very stoic in nature and not very masculine, right? And the CrossFit space in terms of the men and some of these things that happen seem to be very, like, it reminds me of like a bunch of high school bitches, like Mean Girls, right? And I found myself slowly kind of getting into that realm of things, and I'm not about that. I never have been. And I understand that it's entertainment. And for some people, that's the thing that gets their rocks off. But I'll keep it honest with you, that's not what happens for me. Like, I don't give two shits about any of that stuff. I don't care about someone's squat depth because I'm not a spectator of CrossFit. I'm sure if I actually cared about spectating CrossFit, that might be an issue for me, but it doesn't matter to me, especially when we're talking like, ooh, is it up to my discretion or that type of stuff just doesn't matter to me. The standards to me don't matter because I don't care about the sport of CrossFit. Somebody else might, but I don't. I did a podcast with Tanner Shuck, and I love Tanner Shuck's point of view on exercise. I also really like a lot of CrossFit coaches' point of view on exercise. But it's weird to me when there has to be a battle about exercise. We're talking about exercise and one person's opinion of what is best versus another. And in one realm, CrossFit, there's zero data, like almost zero data to support anything. And the confines or the way in which we define CrossFit seems to be ever changing for these people, and you can't win in arguments against them. So I'm not willing to really do that anymore because it's useless and it doesn't matter. If people enjoy doing the thing, let them do the thing. No matter what, no matter what kind of exercise modality it is, who cares? Because really the thing that matters the most is what is going to keep you consistent. What do you enjoy to do? Because that will keep you more consistent, and do that. Just do that. That's how I think about it. And so the thing is, right? And I had one specific figurehead in the space tell me in the DMs, I don't care what the professionals say because they have done way less in terms of helping the majority of people than CrossFit has ever. And it's just a logical fallacy and a stupid thing to even assert about because there have been personal trainers and formal normal exercise for way longer than CrossFit's ever been a thing. Okay? That's just the truth. And so CrossFit doesn't even come close to just exercise in general, right? You can't make that claim about, I'm getting too far. You can't make that claim about CrossFit. Do I personally think that it could be the best modality? Yeah, but that's because I like CrossFit. I like to do it, right? That's because of that. And so anyways, I found myself getting deeper into like these little drama holes and I just didn't like it. Like, I don't like that. I don't mind confrontation whatsoever. But the thing is that a lot of this CrossFit thing is like keyboard warriors, like weird, like just weird drama shit. And it's just like, who is this benefiting? And I didn't want to be a part of it anymore. And so I don't mind because, and then the next thing that happened was like the WFP situation. And then we were kind of getting heat for like platforming people for the WFP and we had plans to talk to more people. But to me, it was more, I have friends in the WFP. I know them, at least like kind of well. And I don't want their names to get dragged, especially over like nothing. Again, I view it as nothing. So anyway, and that's kind of why the whole CrossFit thing ended, right? At least with the podcast. I just don't care for the drama. I don't need to be a part of it. It's not my wheelhouse, dude. And I understand, again, that there's people who like that type of shit. It's just not my jam. And I'm not going to pretend like it is. I just don't care about it. So, yeah. And so moving forward, kind of, like I've said before, or I said this in a story post, if you're here for the CrossFit content, awesome. It's not that it's going to stop. It will probably continue, but the drama shit, I don't care to be a part of. That's just it. And maybe I'll have Joe and Logan host the lives if they're down, and maybe I'll hop in with them on that type of thing and they can talk about what's going on in the CrossFit-Verse. But like for me, the whole point of this podcast in the first place was to talk about mindset and hard work and hardening up and being like stoic kind of, and having these counterculture ideas in terms of like religion and, being more masculine and like what that means and all the like everything. Like culture has just gotten so weird now, even from when I was a kid. Like I feel like we live in the upside down, right? And that's what the whole point of this podcast was to be, and to talk to entrepreneurs and even athletes about like mindset and how they manage everything, how they deal with stuff. That was the idea. It wasn't to be a part of a high school group and talk shit about people. That was never the goal. It's still not the goal. And so, yeah, I realized that my online coaching business and this can work together, which makes it good for content for that, but also makes it good here because I get to talk about the things that I care about and talk about the things that I want to talk about, which is mindset, nutrition, fitness, like real fitness, not just talking about like, your weekend warrior stuff, but like talking to top level athletes and coaches and talking to business owners and, talking to people that come from kind of similar backgrounds as me, maybe crime or like musicians, things of that nature, talking to, ex-cons that made it, that type of stuff. That's really what I like, right? And talk about like, maybe even do reaction videos with like this whole like alpha male universe thing that's going on right now, the red pillars and shit like that. Like put like doing reactions to them because I think it's super corny, and talking about masculinity and stuff and even dating dynamics. Like I'm interested in so many different things and topics, and I want to talk about them all and talk about culture at large because I'm super interested in culture. Also I'm big on conspiracies, right? Quote unquote. And I know that we started doing a segment on that, and I want to continue that. I also want to show you guys the off-grid life that we are trying to create and the prepping stuff that we do. Because I think that stuff is super interesting and cool, right? Like recently when we heard about a certain part of the world going to war and things of that nature, there were some things that I put in place to make sure that if anything happens over here, that we're good, that we're safe, and all these different things. I think that stuff is worth talking about because people should be prepared, right? And so, I'm interested in a lot of things. I do martial arts. I do endurance sport. I do CrossFit. I do powerlifting. Right now, I'm on the journey to deadlift 600 pounds, and I'm doing one event a month for the next foreseeable future to put my body to the test and see all the things I can do. I just got done doing a 40-mile mountain bike race. It was actually a gravel bike race, but I took a mountain bike to it. And did that. In 2 weeks, I'm doing a last man standing 8-hour marathon or ultra marathon attempt. And then after that, I'm doing a duathlon, an off-road duathlon. Like there's so many things that I want to put here and show here that I think are so much more interesting than a drama channel. So I hope that you guys stay along. I hope that you guys like this video. If you made it to the end of the video, please hit that thumbs up button. Please subscribe if you are new. Tell me what you guys want to see. Put in the comments below what you want to see. If you want me to touch on anything else that was in this video, again, I know it was kind of jumbled. That's how my brain works. I feel like that's why I have the creative mindset that I do, because I'm just jumbled. I boom, 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 boom. So anyway, yeah, that's it. Comment down below what you guys want to see. If you want me to touch on any topics here, if you want me to dig deeper into my past, my history, things of that nature. If you want me to dig deeper into the CrossFit stuff, specifically why I left and what I don't like and what I do like, all these different things. I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Goodbye.